Oops. Oh, that's what it was. I thought that was me disconnecting. Hi, Dave and Kurt. So we've got a couple people here anyway. I just keep realizing I keep forgetting to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Regina Mccombs. I am the the senior fellow for visual communication and photojournalism here at the University of Minnesota. Only not here, but you know, here. So thank you guys all for coming today. It's been really fun and interesting to sort of try this sort of new whole day of conference. I'm just going to get right to our main speaker because I'm so excited to have Alex Garcia here. She's a photographer, producer, worked most recently has worked for the New York Times in a variety of roles in multimedia and production, previously at the Washington Post. She was a Neiman Fellow, and she's just an all-around fabulous human being. So I am just going to turn this over to Alex to wrap up this fabulous day. Right. Alex, it's you.
Hooray! Hello. Thank you, Regina, for that introduction. I think we should just leave it there and I'll go leave now. So hello, I am here in my apartment in Brooklyn in New York City, where things are quite weird at the moment. So I'm very excited to be speaking to strangers. I heard somebody earlier today in the presentations was saying that when they are out on assignment these days, people get so excited to meet a stranger, even if it's from like 10 feet away. For me, I'm so excited to be talking to strangers, even if it's like through the internet, because it's been a long month. So yeah, I have been at the New York Times for about 6 years. I started as a web video journalist, and then about 1.5 years ago moved over to the New York Times television show called The Weekly, which is on FX and Hulu. And yeah, so I thought that today an interesting thing to do would be to think about how to make visual journalism with crazy restrictions. So I feel like, you know, when this story started, I was really worried. I was like, how are we going to do our jobs? Our jobs involve, you know, being out and meeting people and being and building trust with subjects. And how are we going to do that when we can't leave our homes? So basically, the New York Times is being really careful about who it sends out and how many people it sends out into the world. They have a pretty intense set of rules, and they also have some suggestions, which I think have been shared in the chat link. They publish them publicly. But for right now and for the past few weeks, I have not been out for a number of reasons, including the fact that I was out trying to report a story about 3-4 weeks ago, and then 4 days later came home with a fever, lost my sense of taste and smell. Maybe my doctor thinks I probably had COVID, but can't get tested. So I have been inside for a very long time, and I'm very happy to be healthy now and talking to all of you. So this got me thinking about all of the ways in which I think sometimes with restrictions, I think sometimes it actually forces families to be more creative, and sometimes I think it makes for more interesting work. So I thought I would show a couple of things that I worked on that I feel like could be produced without leaving your house. Because I know this is not an easy time, especially for visual journalists, the people who are out there filming and recording and shooting. I have so much admiration for. We'll see if I find out that I have antibodies, then maybe I can convince my bosses to let me out. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, in a world of like, it's no longer F8 and be there. I don't know if people still say that in photojournalism, like just get there and be there. It's like, get on Zoom and be there instead. And so this morning on the Daily, somebody shared a quote that I thought was quite inspiring. Hold on, let me share my screen here. There we go. That feels right. Yes. And then this feels right. Oops, that's not right. There we go. So there's a professor, writer at Syracuse who wrote a letter to his students, and I just found it so inspiring to think about the fact that so much of the drama of what's happening with the story is happening in private. And this was to a creative writing class, but I feel like it kind of can apply to journalism and visual journalism as well. You know, it's about capturing what you can in order to make a record, and sort of thinking of ways outside of the box of trying to record what's happening in history and trying to work without leaving your house. So in 2016, I worked on a project about a man, Adolfo Kaminski. I got the assignment from my colleague, Adam Ellick, and he had heard about this through one of our mutual colleagues, Pamela Druckerman, who had heard that this book that was an interview with this man, Adolfo Kaminski, was about to be published in English. And she thought that his story was so interesting that it deserved to be told. And she was like, you know, I think video might be interested in this. We could interview him in video in Paris. And so my colleague Sam Stark and I got the book, and we could not believe this man's story. And we were just like, his history was so rich that we felt like there was no way to tell this story without visuals and without his past was so rich. And I feel like oftentimes, I think, at least for me in video journalism, when I think about something like when I hear a story pitch that's all about something that happened in the past, sometimes I'm just like, well, that's not what video is great at. Video is great at showing things unfolding in the present and showing things changing over time. But for this one, we decided to do something a little bit different. So Adolfo Kaminski was a man who, by the time he was 19, he helped to save thousands of lives by making false passports and other documents for children to flee the Nazis. And we just couldn't believe that we hadn't heard of him before. And so we decided to try to tell the story remotely, sort of. So first we had our colleague Pamela Druckerman send us a bunch of pictures, and it was when we saw these pictures that we realized that we really needed to do something like animation or some way of bringing his past stories to life, because his day-to-day life is just seemed so mundane on the surface. You know, he lives in a tiny apartment in Paris. He like walks around, nobody knows him, nobody knows what he did. And so that's what sort of got us to start thinking. Then we read the book that was being published in English, and what it was his daughter had interviewed him when he came forward to her, and basically, because he had kept this secret that he was like making passports for people to flee the Nazis. He kept it secret for his whole life, because he also went on to forge documents for people to escape so many different conflicts. You know, he forged documents for people who wanted to defect and during the Vietnam War, and he did all of this stuff. And so this had been a secret. And so reading this book, we got the ideas for the scenes that we felt like we had to tell in order to bring his story to life. And when we were thinking about how to tell the story, we were thinking about animation, but first of all, as we all know, animation can be quite expensive. And this was supposed to be originally, you know, a project where we would do an interview and maybe like keep the budget within reason. And also, but we've just thought that like his story was so, we wanted it to still be abstract and shadowy and mysterious. And then we remembered this shadow puppetry company that does theater. And I had seen a show of theirs. I had seen a show of theirs that was told live with shadow puppets during a thing called Pop-Up Magazine. And it like came to my head and I was like, oh, they use paper to tell this story. Like rather than animation, maybe we can have this shadow puppetry theater group make sort of live action animations with puppets of all of the parts of Adolfo's past that we really felt like we wanted to see. So these are some of the storyboards that they originally sent us. And this was a little bit of a backwards way of working for me. You know, I had not had much experience working with visuals that weren't sort of tied to the audio perfectly. And so the idea of like, we put together a complete radio cut first with an interview that Pamela did with Adolfo, and we put together this radio cut, and then, you know, then it's locked and we couldn't change anything, and we had to keep it that way so that these people could build hundreds and hundreds of puppets. And the interesting thing about this is we never met them. This is another example of sort of remote work. While Pamela was interviewing Adolfo, we were here while the shadow puppetry company was working on the puppets for this. They were in Edinburgh at the Fringe Festival. And so we all just like worked remotely together to make this thing. And we didn't end up actually meeting everybody in the story until much later, which was kind of interesting. And so I'm gonna play it. Okay, wait, actually, I'm gonna play about 5 minutes of it, I'm gonna say. And like 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I believe the link to this has been shared in the chat in case, I don't know how.
Yep, it's in the chat window.
Yeah, my internet feels like not great. So if it's skipping, I suggest that you watch it on the link, and I shared the Vimeo link so you don't have to watch an ad.
Mon père avait beaucoup de secrets. Il ne nous parlait jamais de son passé.
Bien sûr, tout ce que j'ai fait était illégal. Mais quand le légal est complètement contre l'humanité, il faut se battre. J'ai entendu contrôle des papiers, fouille générale. Je me suis dit, il faut garder mon calme, ne pas me laisser trahir par la peur. Pas aujourd'hui, pas maintenant. Je savais bien sûr que toutes les polices étaient sur les traces du faussaire de Paris. Aucun d'entre eux n'aurait pu soupçonner à l'époque que le faussaire n'était qu'un gamin. Il y a quoi là-dedans? Mon casse-croûte que vous voulez voir? C'est bon, vous pouvez partir. Tout est bien là, mon trésor. 50 cartes d'identité. Ma plume, mon encre, mes tampons et une agrafeuse. Dans ma vie, j'ai aidé des milliers de personnes à traverser les frontières. Si j'étais découvert, j'étais emprisonné, tué. Si j'étais pris, des tas de gens mouraient. Et puis ça, c'est ma pipe qui permettait d'imprimer avec ça. C'est moi qui ai fait tout ça. Je me souviendrai toujours de la plus grande demande de papier qu'on nous ait faite. 300 enfants. Cela voulait dire plus de 900 documents différents à réaliser dans un délai de 3 jours. C'était pas possible. Il fallait que je reste éveillé le plus longtemps possible. Lutter contre le sommeil. Le calcul était simple. En 1 heure, je fabriquais 30 faux papiers. Si je dormais 1 heure, 30 personnes mouraient. Plus que tout, j'avais peur de l'erreur technique, du petit détail qui aurait pu m'échapper. De chaque document dépendait la vie ou la mort d'un être humain. Alors j'ai travaillé jusqu'à tomber dans les pommes. Quand je me suis réveillé, j'ai continué à travailler. On ne pouvait pas s'arrêter. On a terminé les papiers, mais de justesse.
I think that's enough of that one. Oops, I really just, there we go, stop share. Oh, no, not stop share. Anyway, so that was a little bit of that piece, The Forger. And, you know, I was thinking about it today because so much of this storytelling happened over the phone, over the internet. And so I feel like it's a good sort of inspiration as I'm thinking now, like how to do my job from afar. So anyway, so that is that piece. And I also feel like I was thinking about this piece because, you know, I think it is such a hard and awful time right now for so many people, you know, facing a global pandemic and the uncertainty and the fear. And I feel like this story and like rewatching it while I was thinking about what to say today made me remember just how amazing it is to tell the story about the people who are helping during a moment of crisis. And I feel like there are stories of strength and joy in this darkness also, you know, when people's lives are being saved, when people have so much courage. Stephanie Sinclair had a great quote about courage in her talk a couple hours ago, and now I don't remember it, but it was wonderful along with the rest of her presentation. Yeah, so then another thing I was thinking about, you know, and we're thinking about in my job is, you know, obviously we're doing a lot of different kinds of storytelling. We're trying a lot of different things in this time of uncertainty, but something that we're really thinking about is how we can use archival footage to help tell a story. And so the next thing I was going to show is a story that I did with a few of my colleagues, Ora de Kornfeld, Aaron Bird, a bunch of my colleagues at the Times a couple of years ago, when another very critical time for New York City, which was in 2017, when the MTA declared a state of emergency because our subway had become the subway system with the worst on-time performance of any developed country. And for any sort of mass transit. And so there was a group of reporters at the Times that was investigating this, and they had put together this amazing timeline. And I was online, and, you know, everybody was online at that point. Like, I think one of the great things about social media is you can really hear and see what a lot of people are doing. And so the other thing that was amazing is, like, every time I would get stuck on a subway platform, I would search Twitter, and I would try to, I'd be like, West 4th 30 minutes, or hashtag MTA West 4th, and I would try to find people posting videos from the same subway platform where I was at. So then I would, like, try to find people, which was my own way of amusing myself. But it also made me realize, like, people had incredible videos that I could never have shot, because, you know, you have to be there when you have to be there for the moment. And if you miss it, like, the best footage that you get is the footage of the people who are there getting it. So, you know, when I'm also thinking about, like, how to tell visual stories in this moment, so many of the most powerful things that I've seen have been filmed by doctors, by neighbors on their balconies in Italy, by nurses, by people who are out there experiencing everything. And it made me think about this piece, because so much of it was built using archival footage and footage that came from the internet. And yeah, so I think I'll play 6 minutes of this one, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how we made it.
The city is awake. Across the length of its 5 boroughs, the vast stream of humanity will move.
This was what a New Yorker's commute looked like in 1961.
Can be seen the daily miracle that is the New York City
But
transit system.
that was then.
Convenience.
And this is now.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Subway riders demanding an end to their commuting nightmare.
So fed up with all the delays and cancellations that they are suing the MTA.
New York subway now has the worst on-time performance of any major rapid transit system in the world, and commuters are pissed. This woman's commute has gotten so bad she's considering leaving a job she really likes.
No, I got a new job.
This rabbi was sent into a panic when his train stalled just before Shabbat. And then there's this guy who was stuck underground for so long, commuters saying to pass the time.
Y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here.
It's been 2 hours.
They ended up making a Facebook group. They're still in touch.
Yeah. The mornings where every single line is delayed
feels like cruel or arbitrary.
But it really wasn't that long ago that New Yorkers would laugh at other city subway systems. 4 lines in Boston, 2 in LA, that's cute. In New York, our trains run 24/7. We have 665 miles of track, 472 stations, 27 subway lines, almost 6 million riders every single day.
Does it really have to be this way?
Also, has it always been this bad?
Turns out the MTA has recovered from a transit crisis before.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are being helped momentarily by trains dispatcher.
These were the trains in the 1970s.
Poor maintenance, high crime, and widespread graffiti.
It was kind of scary.
And that's Jim. He's been reporting on the subway since before I was born.
He wrote the book about the subway, literally. In the 70s, it was really, really bad.
Maintenance really had suffered.
So officials poured money into the system, and it improved.
They are working on it. They're doing the best they can.
They're fixing the track. Well, they're fixing the track. They put in a new escalator downstairs.
Improved it in the 80s.
Today we got better equipment, better parts, and better tools.
In the 90s, it gets to be kind of the best it's ever been.
The 1990s were the golden era of subway functionality.
So if you want to prove to someone that New York has it all, just show them your MetroCard Gold.
New York's governor at the time, George Pataki, called it a transit renaissance. But then that city that has it all started taking the system for granted. starting with Mayor Rudolph Giuliani.
Cut down the size of city government.
Just a year into his first term, the mayor cut the city's contribution to the MTA's budget by millions of dollars. And then Governor Pataki followed Giuliani's lead. And so began a trend of mayors and governors diverting part of their budgets away from the MTA and toward their own priorities, and then blaming one another for the problems that followed.
Right.
So while the city and state contributions got smaller and smaller and smaller, subway ridership went up, and so did the fares. But fares still weren't enough to make up for the budget cuts. So a group of Wall Street executives came to the MTA with a deal. These Wall Street execs, they went to the head of the MTA, also known as the governor, and said, "Give us your debt. We'll pay you cash. Pay us back later." Pataki agreed to the deal to refinance the MTA's debt.
Basically, they used the Amex to pay off the MasterCard.
And these bankers, many of whom were donors to Governor Pataki's campaign, walked away with $85 million in commissions and fees. And that debt lives on today.
Finally reaches its destination.
Even if some of the equipment we're still paying for does not.
Great habitat enhancement for fish and shellfish.
Anyway, so that's some of that MTA piece that you can see. I think the link is in the chat. And so what this, what I've been thinking about recently with this is like, it basically all started with this piece started with this timeline that one of our reporters had made, our transit reporter. And in looking at it, there was just such absurdity in some of the things. I mean, it's like, there's one place in here where it says, it's just crazy. Like the Fulton Center opens late and over budget. There's a $15 billion gap in funding. And there was so much that happened. And I felt like there was almost an absurdity to it that I thought could be translated really well in writing. And so something I've been thinking about now, I don't think it's time for this now, but I do hope that, when this crisis starts to fade a bit, that people are going to make explainers and make pieces that explain how exactly, our country got to this point in a crisis, how other countries handled it. I think there's a lot of really interesting data journalism coming out and graphs and charts and things, but I feel like really simplifying decision points that like led to what we're all up against now. I hope that there will be a piece like that coming out. I also think, like, for me, I was always so used to telling stories that didn't have narration, stories that were told in a subject's own voice with their own accent, their own intonation. But recently, in the past couple of years, I feel like I've been trying to write more. And my colleague, Ora Kornfeld, whose voice you hear in the MTA piece, she and I felt like, oh, there's the 7 o'clock cheering for the healthcare workers. That's fun. So I just feel like right now is also a time to like practice, for me to practice like voice in writing and making scripts. And we basically worked on this script not sitting together. We worked on it in Google Docs and we communicated with each other that way. And I feel like it was a really interesting way to work. And I feel like right now, one of the things I'm thinking about also is figuring out how to use this time to write more. So yeah, so let's see. Oh, here, I'm gonna get out of this thing because I can't see myself and I can't see anybody. Where did I go? I don't know where I am. Oh my gosh, 70 participants. Okay, I'm gonna close that again because that's scary. Okay. I don't know why I can't see myself. Okay, well, so right now I'm working on the weekly, which is a show that's on FX and Hulu. It's the New York Times documentary television show. And something that I've also been thinking about in this time of crisis is, you know, the cell phone videos from around the world. Like I mentioned it in the NTA piece. And this was another piece where I feel like would have been told so differently if we didn't use all of the cell phone content that had come to us. And I feel like, you know, I think I used to feel like everything had to be shot beautifully and everything had to be shot on an amazing camera and it had to look slick and everything. But I feel like for certain stories, you know, showing things in the way that people filmed them can often be way more powerful. And so for this story was about something that happened in October of last year, where in the city of Culiacan in Mexico, El Chapo's son had been arrested, and the Sinaloa cartel basically mounted a huge operation to try to get him back. And the thing that was so interesting about this story, I think for all of us working on the weekly, was how much the story came out of that city through social media and through people's own, you know, Instagram stories and tweets. And so we have this amazing team at the New York Times, the visual investigations team, that does reporting based on user-generated video and video that's not shot by the journalists themselves. And so they have a whole team of people who are verifying footage and verifying its veracity, but also, you know, interviewing the people who shot it about how, you know, what happened to them. And so on the weekly, we collaborated with that team, with the visual investigations team, in order to, oh wait, are you not seeing my screen anymore? Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. So we collaborated with them in order to, why is it this? Regina, are you seeing my screen?
I'm seeing your screen. I'm seeing the YouTube channel sitting there.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So we, with the visual investigations team, collected all of this footage, and they, you know, verify the footage by like looking at the shadows in the day, and they find the locations where it was shot based on metadata or based on landmarks. And so we collected hundreds and hundreds of clips from social media and basically used that to retell the story and retell it in a like comprehensive way that wasn't just about, you know, how the Sinaloa cartel basically took on the Mexican government and not just about that, but about the fact that it became clear through looking through all of this footage again that the cartel definitely had a strategy, and it was a strategy that was like clearly planned. And we feel like we got to that point through looking through all of the footage that had been shot by other people and putting it on a timeline and putting it on a map and being able to understand sort of the strategy that the cartel used. So I'll just show the first, oh yeah, I'll just show this, which is the trailer. And this, there should be a link to this on the chat, to the full piece. This is just the trailer.
On Thursday, October 17th, Mexican forces arrested the son of former drug lord El Chapo.
An image appeared online. The expressionless face, or almost a slight smirk, like, yeah, you want to take my picture? Sure. We'll see how this ends. We suddenly just saw this eruption of forceful violence. It was an interesting prism through which to watch a conflict between cartel gunmen and armed forces. It wasn't told through any one narrative, it was told through the eyes of 1,000 people.
Minute by minute, hour by hour. And a fuller story emerges. It is a story about how the Sinaloa cartel took on the Mexican government and won.
Anyway, so that piece, it was my first time collaborating more closely with the visual investigations team. And so I've been thinking now about, you know, like there's got to be a way in this moment to start mapping out the way that things spread and collecting videos about the way that things spread. And it makes me feel like there's another sort of timeline based story that I feel like can be told from home. Now our piece, the thing about it is our piece actually ended up, we ended up going to Culiacan after the siege and interviewing some eyewitnesses, and we used their stories to sort of like break up the timeline of cell phone footage. But you know, I feel like right now something that I'm interested in doing, and like I think everybody is doing, is learning how to film conversations sort of over the phone. And something that I feel like listening to so many podcasts has done for me recently is to really think about the idea that maybe you don't need to see an interview. Like I feel like one thing I'm really interested in experimenting with right now is like American Factory. I don't know if you guys saw the documentary American Factory. There's not one single interview shot in that whole documentary. It's just told with audio of the characters, and they're narrating their own story, and you're seeing them on screen experiencing what's happening to them in each moment, but you're not seeing them like in interview shot retelling something that happened in the past. And so to me it makes it feel so much more present. And so it's one thing I'm thinking about with this crisis is, you know, I think interviewing people over the phone, this is a diagram. Let me share this again. Let me share. Oh, here we go. There's a diagram that I was experimenting with one of my colleagues on the Weekly, Samantha Stark. We spent a day when I was sick with COVID, which is why the iPad is covering up my face. We were experimenting with how to basically get people to record with good video and good audio on their phones while we interviewed them over their computers if they have had both of those. We've come up with some better solutions since this, but I think, you know, it's a time for innovating and trying to figure out how you can make stuff that works, which I think is really interesting, especially like our pieces for the Weekly are 25 minutes. And, you know, I feel like we're seeing so many interviews over Skype or FaceTime or Zoom. And I think those are great because you get people in the moment. But I think for the audio quality, it's really hard to think about. So what we've ended up doing is, like right now we're working on a project and we've ended up getting people little microphones to plug into their phones and recording on their phones. But I know that sometimes sometimes what the Daily does in some of their pieces is they have people, you know, they'll call people on the phone, and if they don't send the person to an audio studio to record, they'll just have people record in voice memo on their phone, and it actually sounds really good. And so another thing that we're thinking about is, you know, if we get other visuals, you know, if we shoot visuals of the city empty as it is now, or whatever we shoot, if there's a way to do the interviews just in audio so we get that good quality and pair it sort of lyrically with what the city looks like and feels like right now. So that's something that we're also thinking about. I hope people are going to have questions. I'm realizing I'm talking too much. I'm gonna skip that one. Yeah, I'm gonna skip it. So just to close up here, I wanted to talk about, you know, the quote that I mentioned at the beginning that's about so much of this story is happening in private. So much of the story is happening in hospitals where people can't get access to shoot in the hospitals for a number of different reasons that make a lot of sense. Safety and patient privacy and all of those things. I've seen a couple of very amazing photo stories that people have managed to do inside. But this is really a time, I think, if you can't get inside a hospital or something like that, I think it's a time to think about what this is doing to us and exploring sort of like the internal experience that so many people are having right now, and this like sort of private, intimate experience, and people's imagination and people's worries and fears and what this moment really feels like. Because I feel like in a, you know, I agree that in, I think 20 years, I think people aren't going to be able to believe what this felt like. Maybe they will, I don't know, but I think it's a time to think about that. So I just want to show a couple clips, which I feel like is a way that to get around video restrictions that, you know, the Olympics are a thing that is very heavily monitored, the Olympics, which now have been postponed, in terms of people being able to shoot video and getting the video rights. And so we've had to be creative at the times with what we do in advance of the Olympics. And so we often put a lot of time and energy into doing these preview packages, which is we go to some of the media days, we do some of these interviews. A few of my colleagues have really amazing relationships that allow us to get people on camera for more than like a minute or two. And so we interview athletes. And one of the things that has always been so interesting to me is when I heard about sports psychologists and how so many Olympians do full visualizations of their whole run. And so they go through these exercises where hundreds of times they will know every turn and every second and they imagine the sound and the smell and what it's going to feel like and look like, so that when they get to doing it in real life, they are able to just basically go on autopilot and not overthink things. And so my colleague, Margaret Cheatham-Williams, and I worked on this project for the Winter Olympics before the Winter Olympics in South Korea, and we published this then when people were competing. We published their visualization routine. And I feel like there's a lot to be done right now, a lot of good visual journalism that's about, you know, what people are thinking about, what people are dreaming about, what people are having nightmares about, what people are experiencing in this crazy, strange time that we're all living in. And so what we did for this is we paired these interviews with animation that kind of helped bring the visualizations that these Olympians were doing to life. I think it's going to be like a minute I'll show like 3 clips. They're each like 15 seconds, and then we can take questions. Or do I have anything else to say? Oh, I have one more thing to say. We'll do that.
If I'm having a type of nervous day or something like that, I actually think about a waterfall. It's something about the water running like fluid and emotionless. That's how I like to think of sliding, is if you could perform like water. It's always constant, it's always moving, it's always going to do its thing no matter what. Nothing's really going to interrupt it.
It makes me so nervous, even when I hear it in the summer, because you know that is the start of the race, and it's like beep, 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 beep.
The most present, hyper-focused moment of my entire life. I've just sort of buckled my snowboard on. I can feel the pressure of my straps on my ankles. Is it snowing or is it sunny? Is there wind on my face? I reach over to the gate. I make sure the handles are adjusted to the right height. I'm looking at the top of the start gate. just waiting for it to move, trying to feel what that adrenaline's like.
I'm the bow with the arrow drawn, waiting, and when that beep changes, that's the release, and that's the acceleration, and I'm the arrow, and I'm accelerating down the track.
So anyway, we did a series of, I think 6 of these are each about 5 minutes. And I've just been thinking recently, like, also in this time, there are also so many artists and animators and people out there whose day-to-day lives have been affected, their jobs have been canceled, everything. And I just feel like there is such an interesting, it's such an interesting moment right now to work with new people. And even though I think we're all trapped in our homes, and to some extent, I think we can still collaborate. And I feel like collaboration is the way to like make creative things that we can make without leaving our homes. And so, I wonder if there's a way to do this kind of storytelling with somebody who is used to, maybe with someone who worked in a different outbreak somewhere, maybe a doctor who worked on the Ebola outbreak or something like that. I feel like there's so much to do there. And so I like made a little bit of a revision to the great quote that I shared at the beginning of this, which is the stuff that I'm thinking about how to tell this story without, without being in the field, which is like, there is so much to be pulled from this moment. We're all seeing and feeling the story unfolding in front of us. And it's just about like capturing those things that exist. So I changed it to say, when the drama is happening in private, are you or others, like different subjects you could have, keeping records of the emails and the texts that they're getting, the thoughts they're having, and what will convince the future kid, a kid in the future, is what we're able to make during this time that will help people understand what this time felt like without leaving your house. That's it. Okay. Oh my gosh, I talked too much. Okay. Questions. Let me stop the sharing. Hello.
Hi there.
I see myself again. Oh, this is good. I can see you 3. Okay, that feels so much better. I wasn't able to see myself, and or anybody, and it's really hard to just talk into a screen. Whew. Hello.
Hi. So I was interested the other day when we were talking, you had mentioned that you guys were asking doctors in New York to record their experience. And lo and behold, a couple of days later, a doctor in Queens had the New York Times published something on her experience. And then I think she's since been fired. That must have been kind of an interesting thing to see going on. I don't know what role you had in that, if any.
I didn't have a role in that. That was made by my colleagues on the video desk. Now I'm on this show, and the show is separate from the video department, but I used to work in the video department, and I think the work that they're doing right now is incredible. But yeah, that piece really moved a lot of things, because I know there have been articles all over the place. The Journal wrote an article. There have been a couple of articles on CNN that have actually been sort of pushing more of these hospitals to open their doors to journalists, because I think it's really hard for people to understand what this feels like for the medical workers on the front lines, because they're not allowed, it's so hard to get inside as a visual journalist to any of these hospitals. And on one hand, of course, I understand that, but on the other hand, I feel like the way that we're all going to understand what is happening in our country is if we can see stuff. So for that piece, it was amazing. Yeah, they asked the Dr. Colleen Smith to record for 72 hours, and then she shared her video with the video desk and did a bunch of interviews with them, and thought that piece was really powerful.
I did too. I thought it was really incredible.
Yeah, and she's since been diagnosed with COVID, so that's been an interesting thing to see happen too. I'm not sure what, I don't actually know what happened to her employment status, but it seems like you know better than I do. Yeah.
And it might have been just a headline I read that I thought I'd read that she'd gotten dismissed for publicly displaying what was going on, but I could be wrong. That, that might have been just a quick read somewhere.
Are there any questions?
Yes. So Kurt Chandler, our friend Kurt, says when he thinks of the world-class innovators on the New York Times video team, you, Samantha, Liz, Aura, Deborah, from investigations, it certainly shows that women can do the work in a male-dominated field. Can you talk more about how this team came together?
Ooh, it's, I know that it was all through people who we knew each other. So like, I knew Margaret Cheatham Williams from the Washington Post. Nancy knew me from the Washington Post. Nancy and Margaret Cheatham grew up in the same town in North Carolina. They went to college together. Aura worked with Liz Balin at the LA Times. Liz Balin came to work at the New York Times. And I just feel like one thing that's been amazing at the Times over the past few years, and especially in the video department, is how, Nancy Gauss runs the video department, and she's done a really good job of making sure that, talented women come and work there and support each other and work together with each other. And it's been I feel very lucky to have gotten to work with all of those women. Yeah, and I don't know, it's funny because in the video department, it really doesn't, I forgot that it's like a male-dominated industry, just because it feels like so many of my colleagues and collaborators there were women. And so that was it's kind of a nice thing to forget about. It's like, it's an amazing place to work and an amazing team. And I feel like, through that experience, I've like met people I want to collaborate with for like the rest of my career, Sam Stark and I worked together on The Forager, and now we both moved together to work on The Weekly. And yeah, I also think that for so long, video journalism was so solo. I remember at one time somebody was like, well, you're a lone wolf. And I was like, what does that mean? And I just feel like now video journalism and documentary are kind of like, there's so much mixing going on that we are getting used to working with bigger and bigger teams, like with people with specialties. And I feel like the ability to we're all collaborating together a lot more. And I feel like the team then becomes so important. And I agree. That's a team that is full of wonderful women.
So can you just tell us just kind of what your role is on The Weekly, what you're actually doing?
Yeah. Great question. So I'm a director / producer. We have slashes in our titles for The Weekly, which means that, my role, I'll explain what it was, for this season was to do 2 to 3 pieces over the course of the year. There were 8 of us. And so we would meet with the story team. There's a story team at the New York Times that would sort of scour the newsroom for stories that were being told and by reporters or interesting things that the newsroom wanted to focus on, topics that they felt like were getting hidden. And so we would meet with the story team, get an assignment, and then our job was to write a treatment of what we felt like the story should be, work with a reporter often to identify, the sources that we needed to talk to. And then, this was all new for me, sort of getting a team of freelancers together, a shooter, a cinematographer, an audio producer, getting us all together to go on shoots together. And then in the field, watching the monitor, giving feedback to the cinematographer, coming up with ideas with the cinematographer, talking to the audio people, and just kind of like getting everything together in the field, which was a brand new thing for me. It was, and it's fascinating to like move to a place where at first I found it really difficult, because I would feel like the way that I would get invested in a story was through seeing it, like being so in it, you know, with your headphones on and you're shooting and you're like so in it. And at first I found it really hard to be back from the action, watching it all on a screen, and deciding like, are we getting all the shots that we need? Is this gonna cut together with our next scene that we're gonna film? But I feel like I learned a bunch about how to do that, and I feel much more comfortable doing that now, and I love it now, because, you know, I feel like I was working with people who were such specialists that like they could shoot better than I ever could, or the audio would be crisper and cleaner and more amazing than what I ever could make on my own. And so I feel like I've learned how to get a team, go out and like work with the team and make a thing, and then get an editor. And so then during the editing process, you know, we get a week to sort of script things out, watch things, chunk things out, and then we work with an editor, and we sit in the same room with them, and then usually are working in collaboration with them, in tandem with them, to build the story and find quotes and all that stuff. So that's my job. It's very nebulous.
Okay. So Aaliyah asks, do you think this is a good time for photographers with limited video experience to try out video? What advice do you have for those of us who are interested in doing video but have limited experience?
I feel like this is an amazing time, actually, to start experimenting with like the most important thing about video. Whatever, what am I saying? I'm exaggerating, but which is working with the audio, and like working with doing interviews, whether it's over the phone or over Zoom, and learning to ask questions in a way where you get answers that tell a full story in full sentences, and then taking that audio and like learning how to structure it so that you're telling a story that like keeps people engaged and has little surprises and twists and turns in the story, and figuring out how to put together that sort of audio spine to a story. I feel like right now, like in this crisis, I feel like that is something that is so valuable to do, and you can do it mostly over the phone. In terms of whether this is the right time to learn video, I would say I don't think that there's a bad time to learn video. I mean, of course there's it's challenging right now, but I've been even thinking about trying to do like a very simple series where like I ask people to film outside their window every morning and say like what, you know, the things in their life that like note the tiny things that they notice changing outside their window. I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of like simple experimental things that I feel like are really good for getting practice in putting together stories. I don't know if that's a great answer. It's a very weird time to think about like the cornerstones of video that I feel like that we all used to do, which is like meeting people in the field and getting comfortable with them, and them getting comfortable with you, and having a camera and asking them uncomfortable questions while you're in the room with them. I feel like it's harder to do that right now, but I think it is a good time to work on interviewing and how good of an interviewer you are, and editing and structuring stories, and even writing narration. I feel like it's like a really good time to do that.
Awesome. Okay, well, Kurt's crabby about the indexing of the New York Times, but I won't make you answer that question because it's not your fault.
I don't know what it is, but it's surely not my fault.
All right.
It's invisible, abstract for most people except, there's a, except the healthcare, there's a question in here. I know it's sensitive, but it reminds me also of the most invisible wars of the recent past. COVID-19 seems to happen elsewhere. Yeah, it's a yeah, it's a direct threat to everybody. Yeah, totally. I feel like, and I think that's what we have to learn how to do, is even if we can't be out there, how to represent that, how to represent these crazy numbers that we're hearing, 50,000 people volunteering to come and work in New York's healthcare system right now. The staggering number, I think we're at 3,000 deaths right now from COVID and I feel like there's got to be a way. I've been thinking a lot about the obituaries that the Times has been doing about the people who have, lost their battle with COVID. And I've been thinking so many of them are musicians and actors. And I feel like there must be a way to like do stories about these people and tributes from, interviewing their loved ones at a certain point, and I feel like there's a way to do that that's going to help humanize these numbers a little bit more, because I agree that it feels really abstract right now. Yeah.
There's another question. I don't think you worked on the animations, right? You worked with a team who did it. You didn't directly work on the Forger animations.
For the Forger animations? Yeah, so I did not make those shadow puppets. There's an amazing shadow puppet theater company called Manual Cinema. They're based in Chicago. And my colleague and I, Sam Stark, thought that they would be like the right people to tell Adolfo's story, because they make everything out of paper, and what he was doing was forging documents in paper. And so, we collaborated with them in that, like, we did the audio story first with the interview that we did, and then we got storyboards from them, and then we like worked together on like, well, is this going to be clear enough? Is this going to be unclear enough? And then also they have a composer, and so we worked with a composer on the music, and so we were like sharing notes with them and like feedback, but they are like masters of shadow puppetry, and I find what they do magic, and I could never do anything like that.
And in like the subway piece, when you're doing the animations, what software did they build that in?
So Aaron Bird is an incredible designer and illustrator who works at the Times, and he collaborated with us on the animations for the subway piece, and he was making everything in After Effects. But then we also worked, and this was all very, Aura had the incredible idea of doing some of those stop motion, especially like the chapter headings with the toy trains. And there's a woman, a director, her name is Ann Lupo, and we worked with her she worked on the stop motion stuff. So that was another like giant team of amazing creative people that all contributed to this very weird and funny piece, where if you watch it later, there's a subway busker who sings his way through one of the we wrote a song with him to explain bond issuance fees, because we thought it was too boring to just explain it, and so or one of Aura's friends is a musician, and so he wrote the song, and so if you watch later in the piece, that's where that happens. But it's just a ton of very talented people who basically made us look good.
We worked with a children's show host, Choo Choo Bob, to explain the new LRT expansion. So, yeah,
I feel like we can do that now, and we can all do that while we're sitting at home. We can make ask somebody to make stop animations, and like I feel like this is such a good time for experimenting with new story formats and new ways of like making explainers, because I feel like everybody really wants to do things with their hands, because we're all like stuck at home looking at screens all day.
All right, so Deborah's interested in your education and career path and how it led into video.
Oh, I have a very weird background. I guess I feel like a lot of people in video don't take a very traditional path. I started as a painting major at an art school in Baltimore, and I always had thought I would be a painter or a drawer. or doing fine arts in some way. And then I had a course after my sophomore year. During my sophomore year, I had a course that was about, it was like a graphic design class where we were designing a book based on someone else and sort of like a biography. And so we had to go find somebody and talk to them and tell their story in a book that we designed, like graphic design. And so I remember going out there with an audio recorder, and I found this amazing subject who hopped freight trains. He taught me how to hop a freight train, which was kind of amazing. Such a college thing to do. Very dangerous, not good. But I remember going out there and interviewing him, and I had so much, it was so interesting just to hear him telling his own story. And I would go back, and I went back, and I remember I would like play it. It was like on a little tape, one of those mini tape things back in the day. And I would play it, and there was something about it where something clicked in my head where I was like, wait a second, the real world and these real people are so much more interesting than these like paintings that I'm making up out of my imagination. And so I decided to switch, and I switched and did photography. Oh no, then I was like, oh, I'm gonna make documentary films. That's gonna be it. I took one documentary film class, and I was like, you have to keep the audio good and the video good. It was like so overwhelming for my brain. So then I was like, no. So then I did photojournalism, and I transferred schools. I did photojournalism, and then I got an internship at the Washington Post my last semester at American University, and as a web photo editor on nights and weekends. And this is when like nobody cared about the internet. It was like right at the beginning of the internet. And so they let like me be the photo editor for the Washington Post homepage when I was like 21. And there was like one other woman, and she was like 20, and she was like writing all the headlines on the and it was just two of us on the weekends, like running the Washington Post homepage. It was so funny and amazing. But there was this group of people who were at the Washington Post who would like play ping pong all day. They were like the webby people, and they were telling these incredible video stories. And so I would bug them all the time. This was like Travis Fox and Ben De La Cruz and Pierre Cotard and John Poole and Jennifer Crandall. There was this group, and they were like the pioneers of web video journalism. And I remember like asking them if I could carry their tripod, and if I could like do their audio, and then like sort of faking it to my boss at the time, Tom Kennedy. And he was like, do you think you can do a video story? And I was like, absolutely. And then I went out, I had no idea what I was doing. I came back with like a mess. And those guys and Jen were so kind, and they helped me work through it. And so they basically taught me on the job how to do that. And then I did audio storytelling for audio slideshows, which were a thing. And that's, I think, how I learned to edit, was doing audio first and then pairing it with photographs. And then I started doing video full time. That's my story. It's my very weird story.
All right, that's awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, and Deb says, great story. So there you go. Thank you so much for this. This is wonderful. And it is, I love watching you sort of go, and there's a story there, and there's a story there, and I think there's a story there. And I think that's sort of how we need to be thinking about this, instead of thinking about it as, I can't do that. I can't do that. There's nothing I can do. So thank you for that.
I think there's going to be some amazing journalism that comes out of this. And I think, I think it needs to happen, because this is like a story that of our lifetimes, I feel like. So I feel like we should figure out how to make good work.
All right. I am going to let you go. Sorry, those last few questions we're not going to get to because we're past time, but and it's even later where Alex is. So thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who helped sort of make this come together in its craziness and odd stuck togetherness. And it worked, I guess. So questions, problems, thoughts, please feel free to send them my way. We hopefully won't do it this way again next year, but you just never know. So yeah, so thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.